Hi, this is Chase Utley, and this is the Phillies Show.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Phillies Show with Ruben Amaro Jr., Jim Salisbury. I'm Todd Zalecki. It is Friday, May 31st, 2024. Phillies coming off an off day and a 2-4 road trip through Colorado and San Francisco. Kind of the first bit of adversity the Phillies have faced really since maybe the first week of the season. So naturally, some concern amongst Phillies fans about what they saw on this road trip. Some of their blemishes maybe bubbled up a little bit more than they have over the first several weeks, or certainly the last several weeks of the season. And I'm not too worried about it. Ruben, you were out there. What was the vibe? Give me the vibe of the this road trip and what the flight home.
Yeah, I think the flight home was great, but leading up to that, I mean, obviously there's a team that a couple of teams that they just don't play well either in Coors Field or in Oracle Park. I mean, it's just, I don't know what it is. They just over the years they just do not play well there. I think the atmosphere and not so much the atmosphere. I think the fact that you're in that high altitude. I think that's a little bit of difference. I think that you see that some of the pitchers have to make certain adjustments there, that it takes a little time. You saw that happen a couple of times with guys on the mound. And I think that it's one of those places that it's so wonderful to hit there that I think that guys get out of their plan. One of the things that the Phillies have done really, really well over the last, month and a half or so is situationally hit. They've stayed in the middle of the field. I just saw some bigger swings. I saw some approaches that were not nearly as consistent as they have been, and just kind of letting things happen. It almost seems like, oh my God, I'm here at Coors Field. I got to do some raking. This is the time to do some, make some hay with home runs and things like that. And I just think that they got a little bit out of their plan. I think that was part of it on the offensive side, because they faced a couple of guys with like enormous ERAs. Guys who are just not great. The pitching's just not great. And in San Francisco, it was just a matter of running into a team I think that's pretty hot right now. They're playing pretty good baseball. San Francisco came in and won 3 or 4 crazy games late in games, and historically won 3 or 4 games down more than 3 runs or 3 runs or whatever. And they're just playing hot baseball. The fact that they salvaged that one game that was huge. Got a great start from Christopher Sanchez, man, and he's been really good. I mean, he's been pitching like a 3, really, really solid. I'm really impressed with his whole transformation, and I mean, we could sit here and talk for a half an hour about what he's done. Just making an adjustment to being a pitcher, the fact that he's now got his velocity back up to where he was before, and he's commanding it. It's pretty extraordinary. He's also thrown a little slider and even featured the cutter, which he had abandoned because he couldn't get a feel for his changeup in spring training. The fact that he's now utilizing that pitch, I mean, you see the confidence in his whole game continuing to improve, and it's quite a find, man. That's a really good number 4, number 5, and that's huge. And he became sort of like the stopper for him, and stopped the flow, and did a really good job of salvaging that last game.
Yeah, he provided really good bookend starts to start the trip and to end the trip. And I agree with you. Putting up that great start in the final game in San Francisco just changed the entire sort of psychological complexion of the road trip for me. But I think they left for the road trip with the best record in baseball. They had a poor road trip, and they come home with the best record in baseball. Pretty good. I mean, we talk about the peak level they had been playing at, and how it's just it's not sustainable. It doesn't mean you can't be a good team, but you're going to have ebbs and flows. And they had a little ebb here, but Christopher Sanchez and the bats that day helped them get back on track. Coming home, I just think hitting comes and goes, and when it goes, when you go cold a little bit, the good hitters get out of it quickly. So, Stott had been having an awesome month. Bohm had been having an awesome season. Harper had been having an awesome month. All three of those guys hit under 200 on the trip. But I think that was probably one of the reasons, they scored 2 or fewer runs in half of the games out there. So the offense just wasn't there on the trip. But, hey, that happens. Thursday's off day to me comes at a great time. You got to win before it on Wednesday. You get the off day to kind of have a cleansing breath, come back in front of a big crowd on Friday night and get it going again. So I love where they're at, guys.
Yeah, there's no reason to freak out over a 6-game West Coast road trip. I mean, if you freaked out over every 6-game West Coast road trip that didn't go the Phillies' way, you'd be losing your mind. Yeah, over the years. I mean, it's something always crazy happens out there. Even for the really good teams. I mean, Nick, you mentioned the offense. Nick Castellanos had a big game in that series finale. Hit the home run. I think he double, single, first 3 at bats. He was a triple away from the cycle, and we keep going. Is this the game that gets Nick turned around? Is he finally starting to show something? And you look at his last 8 games or so. I was looking at it, and he's hitting the ball a little bit better the last 8 games, like an OPS over 800. They need some more production from that outfield. That's something that's really kind of popped up, I feel like. And the way that they were playing the first several weeks of the season, it kind of flew under the radar a little bit. Johan Rojas was starting to creep up, and now it's a little bit more of an issue. Is it a big issue? Is this something that has you guys concerned? I feel like right now, the way the team is playing, it's not, sirens going off, but it could be towards the end of July when you start thinking about the stretch drive.
Yeah, I think it's. I don't know if it's an issue, but certainly when Marsh is not playing every day because they're facing so many left-handers, and so Rob Thompson's wanting to get Pache some at bats. He wants to get Merrifield some at bats, and Merrifield's really not done a lot for him clearly, and still adjusting to that. Not everyday role, and he hasn't really been all that productive. Pache actually had a pretty decent game that last game, playing in center field. I think it's just they have not gotten a lot of production out of Marsh, and obviously not very much out of Castellanos, which is more of a concern because the guy just can't hit 200 and everybody think that's okay. That's not going to happen. I mean, that shouldn't happen. I think he's a much better hitter than this. I mean, Jimmy and I have talked about this probably ad nauseum. At some point, you'd think he's going to start breaking out. I think he's hitting the ball a little bit harder. He actually said that in the post game when we talked to him about it. I think that there's more. There's obviously more bat in there. And Rob Thompson keeps throwing him out there to make sure that he tries to swing his way into being that productive player. But when you have a guy like Marsh on one corner, not playing every day and sort of getting sporadic at bats because of the left-handers that they're facing, and then you got Castellanos on the other corner not really producing like he can or has, then it gets a little concerning. I think if you get into the middle of June and you're getting that kind of production, same production that you're getting out of these guys then, because you're not going to get a whole lot of production in center field. That's just not going to happen. But if you're not getting that kind of production or more production out of those guys in the corner, then you got to start thinking about, okay, I might have to go get an outfielder who's at the trade deadline, maybe, who's going to be a little bit more productive. I would not panic about it now, because they don't have Turner in that lineup. And so you're missing that production. At some point, he's going to come back. We'll probably talk about that a little bit. But that's my take on the outfield thing. I don't get all too tied up in like what positions on the field are producing. I just need people to produce. Whether it's an infielder, an outfielder, a catcher, it just doesn't really matter. You'd like to have more production throughout the lineup because that's what makes it so deep and so special. But I think Marsh is a key there because I think he needs to start playing more and needs to get in there and get more reps because he's a much better player, I think, when he's getting, consistent at bats.
I do think it's you say it doesn't matter where you get the production from, but you look at this team, they've gotten a ton of production from the infield. And when it backed off a little bit on this trip, the outfield's flaws in production really showed up because they didn't score runs. And you look at their overall all three spots outfield production, and in a lot of important offensive categories, they're in the bottom third in Major League Baseball. I mean, some of these solutions might come from within if Marsh gets going, if Merrifield, when he plays, gets going, and of course when Castellanos plays every day, if he can start to turn it around. But we have crossed over the 1/3 mark of the season, and traditionally, I mean, this, Ruben, Todd, covering baseball. That first third of the season, you're kind of getting your arms around what you have, and maybe that second third of the season is adjustment time, and then the final third is, you got your team, and boom, you're off and running. I'm wondering, now that we've crossed the 1/3 line, big, like I said, evaluation time, getting a handle on what you have. As the trade deadline comes into a little more focus here, Todd, what are you kind of lining up here as areas you think you might need to improve? Because I will remind you, though they have the best record in baseball, that's nice, but you're not in this to have the best record in baseball. You're in this to win the World Series, and you still need to build a team that is invincible in October. It is all about October. So there are tweaks that need to be made for success in October. What are you looking at, Todd, on your radar, maybe at the deadline?
Well, yeah, I think outfield for sure. You look at it will be interesting to see how far, if this situation does not improve. I think if Castellanos starts playing like Castellanos, it kind of the ship rights itself in a sense. Be great if Marsh. No, I feel like Rob Thompson's in a tough spot in terms of Marsh because his at-bats have been so substandard against lefties. He's hitting 139, 399 OPS against lefties, 18 strikeouts and 43 plate appearances. So the at-bats have not been very competitive. And so you talk about, being more competitive, getting better production from the outfield. Do you have the patience right now to just run Marsh out there against lefties and see if he can get on track? That's interesting. But yeah, how big do you go if you go in the outfield? That to me is an interesting question. Do you go for an everyday player? Say the white, Luis Robert Jr., center fielder. He's coming back from the injured list. He would be really good if they could get him, but now he's playing in center field. Maybe he could play in the corner, but who do you take out of there? Who do you have to give up to get somebody like that? Is there more of a part-time player? How does that guy fit in with their current makeup? And then of course, I feel like, Ruben, you've said this before, if you can't find a bat, maybe just continue to load up on pitching, maybe try to find another lockdown reliever or two. Maybe you go in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, I always err on the side of pitching, but I think that there's a right-handed bat situation. Castellanos does not. I mean, obviously we're missing Trey Turner, so that's a big piece of it. That's a right-handed bat in that lineup that's important. And then you end up, pushing JT, back behind Bohm or around in that area probably, and that gives you a little bit more right-handed depth. But if they don't get production out of Castellanos, then I'm looking for a right-handed bat that, and maybe it is a guy like Robert. Maybe it is a guy. I mean, if you really want to go for it,
that would be the guy. That would be a guy that you would.
Perhaps they trade a guy like Johan Rojas for the guy. I mean, who knows? I mean, I'm just, and I haven't really looked at Robert's contract or his situation and how long they would have him for, but who knows? I mean, listen, Dave Dombrowski and John Middleton and all others associated with the Phillies are hell-bound and hell-bent on winning a World Series, and not just this year, for many years to come. John Middleton talks about it all the time. Multiple ones. He wants to have a legendary team that's going to be good for a long time. Now they're set up to actually be good for the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, the way they're set up, I think, right now, and at least 3. And so you got to get that first one. And so I think that the sky's the limit as far as them making a move. But a lot of it depends on, like I said, and then Jim made a great point. I mean, 1/3 of the season, you have a pretty good idea, but with guys like Castellanos who have like a certain number or certain numbers on the back of that baseball card, you give them a little bit more time. I think by the end of June, if you're not getting production out of Castellanos and you're not getting production from the left side against lefties again with Marsh, I think at some point he's going to have to. I think you're right, Todd. I think that Rob Tom's going to have to sort of find out if he can do it. Right now, he's obviously not. Then I think you got to think about, okay, I need a right-handed bat that's going to do some damage.
Yeah.
If they're committed to Castellanos, that would put maybe Rojas in more focus as an area to get improved offense. His defense is his calling card, but it hasn't been like triple elite like we think it can be. What are we thinking on him after a third of the season? Are we still going forward with him, or might we tweak in that area? I'm not saying give up on him, but he's still a developing player.
Well, I think
he needs more time in AAA.
Todd?
Yeah, I mean, he could, if they decide that if the offensive production in the outfield has not stepped up, I think that would be a way to go. You know, they love his defense, of course. You know, if they find another right-handed bat, you can always move Marsh back to center if you wanted to do that. Find a corner outfielder in that regard. And so now you lose a little bit of defense in center field. Although Marsh is very good in center field, so you could possibly do that. So I think that's a fit. If the outfield does not step it up again, I think if Castellanos can get going, that kind of lessens the urgency to do this.
Absolutely.
But he hasn't shown it so far. Last 8, like I mentioned, last 7 games, batting .258, 3 home runs, 5 RBIs, .839 OPS. But he's had these stretches before we go. It's kind of emerging. He's got to do it for longer than that, of course.
Yeah, he certainly does. Now, I would consider sending Johan Rojas down if he doesn't. See, I think that he can be an elite center fielder, but Pache's playing just as well in the center field. I can see him being able to do that. Now, they may be, and it could put them in a position to maybe platoon Marsh and Pache in center and, you know,
get somebody,
move things around and maybe get a corner outfielder, whatever the case may be. I like Marsh in center. I don't love him as an elite center fielder. I think he's just, you know, he would be solid average center fielder, but I think it just makes the outfield so much better when you have a guy like either Pache or Rojas in center and the other guys in the corner. Just a much better defensive outfield. Now, do you sacrifice? I mean, that's what's the beauty of being a GM and making these decisions is that, you know, you have to kind of think about what is going to get us to the next level, meaning which is good, what's going to put us in a position to win the World Series. And that's a great position to be in. They're in a great position. There's no question about it. Just a matter of, you know, what they would want to give up and how that impacts the rest of the team.
Well, talking about offense, and you've kind of mentioned this, they are without Trey Turner, who was doing some great things. We thought we'd see him knocking on the door now for a return, but he's been slowed by a setback. What is with the hamstring? What are we feeling like when we're going to see Trey Turner?
So here's what I saw. I mean, I know that they're being super cautious with him because they don't want it to linger. They want to make sure that in August, September, and October, and November that this guy's going to be just fine. And so they're being very cautious with him. He had a little soreness. Frankly, I was a little surprised that they took him out to Colorado because because of the thin air and stuff like that, it's not the greatest place to recover. And I thought they might send him out. Of course, I'm not a doctor, but it just didn't seem like that was a great place for him to continue his work. Anyway, that said, he ends up, getting a little tweaked, a little sore, but it was cool to see him in San Francisco go ahead and take some swings off the tee. And he was out there when the guys were doing infield drills. He's out there, hanging out with them. I think he's really chomping at the bit. Yeah. It will be interesting. I'm not sure what he's done as of today, Friday, where he's going to go. I believe that he's going to continue, and start up his running program again, either Friday or Saturday, I believe, but I'm not sure. But I think again, they're just trying to be super, super cautious with him, but he is absolutely chomping at the bit.
Taiwan Walker has also been getting a lot of attention recently. Has not been pitching well. And I know you need to give him some run. They have a bunch of off days coming up so they could shuffle the rotation if they wanted to. He's got 2 years left on this deal of a $72 million deal. We talked a lot earlier when Turnbull was going great, how you have to give this guy a shot. He made 31 starts last year. He won 15 games. He pitched almost 180 innings. But his numbers are not great. Small sample size-ish, but not so small. You look at some of his metrics, average exit velocity against 91.6 miles an hour. And you say, well, what is that? What the hell does that mean? It's the bottom 5% of all pitchers in baseball right now. So he's getting hit hard. Guy who once threw a splitter more than any other pitch. That was his money pitch, threw a third of the time last season. Opponents hit 205 with a 295 slugging percentage. Taiwan Walker's only throwing that pitch 19% of the time this year. They're hitting 515, 758 slugging percentage against his formerly his best pitch.
So what you're saying is he doesn't have his only weapon.
He doesn't have his only. He's not getting any swing and miss right now. He's, with that pitch and just with his pitch in general, whiff rate 15.1%. That's swings and misses on all swings, bottom 2%. So that's a concern because you thought the storyline was give him some time. He's going to get it figured out. You got to give him some time. The split's going to come. Well, so far it hasn't come. So far the swing and miss hasn't come. Is this something you guys are concerned about, or is it too early? Can they afford to be patient? It's not killing them, I guess, because like you said, Jim, at the very top, they still have the best record in baseball. You do have Spencer Turnbull. That's something you guys think should be a concern.
Yeah, it would be a concern for me. I do think, given the innings you got from him last year, that earned him. There's a lot of different words for it: the opportunity, a little bit of respect, leash. But it's getting shorter. Just because the pitches are over the plate and they're getting hit very hard. And this team should have high standards. That if you're not getting the job done, need to make a change. Have somebody else. Turnbull is an excellent option. He pitches this weekend, right? He'll pitch on Sunday.
Sunday, yes.
I think it's a big start. I think a lot of eyeballs will be on him. For me, I'm not at the end of my leash yet, but starting to tug a little bit. I'm starting to tug a little bit.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. Here's the issue from a GM's perspective, okay? I know, at least I get the feeling now, having seen Turnbull pitch out of the bullpen, that he can be effective enough to be that guy in the bullpen. And you need bullpen help. I mean, that's part of this whole process too. Now, if you have a much better rotation, the bullpen piece of that, that becomes diminished. That said, I know that Turnbull, as a GM, if I'm a GM, that he can pitch out of the bullpen. I don't think, and my feeling is, that if you flip-flop these guys, what are you really going to do with Walker?
Yeah.
Is he going to be able to pitch out of the bullpen? They didn't trust him to pitch out of the bullpen in the
Right.
playoffs, obviously, and that was an issue.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the concern I have. That's why I think the leash is going to continue to be a little bit longer, and they're going to have to play it out and see, okay, can this guy get this split together? The split is huge for him because if he can't get it, he's not going to be nearly as an effective pitcher. The cutter he's throwing is better. He's throwing some more breaking balls and they're a little bit better, but that's not his bread and butter. His bread and butter is his split. And right now, his arm side life, they talked to Cotham. I think it was Tom McCarthy talked to Cotham a little bit about this. He hasn't been able to get that arm side action on his split. So if he can't get the feel for that pitch and get it working down, then that could be really troublesome for him. And they may very well have to, think about making a switch. But when you do that, then you lose another guy in the bullpen in Turnbull, and who do you replace that guy with? So there's a lot of dynamics other than just, taking the guy out of the rotation that, there's a domino effect that you have to think about long-term as well.
How big of a dynamic, Ruben, for a GM or a front office is the contract?
It's a dynamic. It's part of it. But again, at the end of the day, if they don't think that he can be an effective pitcher, it's about wins, man.
It's about wins.
It's about wins. There were some difficult decisions that we had to make over the years. Jenkins, we ended up, releasing. We ate $6 or $7 or $8 million on him. We just, released him.
You did the same thing with Adam Eaton that spring. You cut Adam Eaton as well.
Yeah, so you have to think about doing things that are not comfortable. But if you want to be an elite team, sometimes you got to make those decisions and eat some money. I don't know. I don't think they're at that space now. Because
I'm more or less talking about how big of in terms of sticking with him in the rotation. I'm not talking about cutting ties.
I think it's a factor, but I think the depth is more of a factor than the money, because hey, all of a sudden something happens, God forbid, to Aaron Nola, and you took that other guy out of the rotation. Now you're now what do we do? Who's the next guy in line? And
their starting pitching depth is not that good.
The depth is the thing that really concerns me, and they have enough of a cushion right now that while you're tugging on that leash because it's getting shorter and shorter, it's going to be longer for this guy because they still have the best record in baseball and they're going to make the playoffs. Right. You know what I mean? So it makes it a little different, a dynamic. It may not be right. It may not be the perfect thing, but it also creates, if you take him out of the rotation and shorten him up and then he's not prepared to, then you're really crushing your depth. And that's the last thing you want to do at this stage, especially when you have this sort of cushion.
We got a bunch of listener questions. I asked for some last night, and I want to get to this. This is one that I could not find it this morning, so I apologize to the person who sent it out. Who is the funniest player, manager, coach, Ruben, I guess you worked with, Jim, that you covered? Who's the funniest?
A lot of funny guys.
There's a lot of funny guys.
I played on a team in Buffalo, guys, that I will tell you, it was a AAA team. It probably could have been, we could have won against some major league teams that year in 1995. I will tell you that Billy Ripken and Casey Candell, that combination of those two players, I literally belly laughed for the entire time I was there. Jeremy Burnitz was part of that team. You think about this and Brian Giles. So I had Brian Giles, myself, and Jeremy Burnitz in the same outfield. Obviously I was the weakest link of that, but I was a pretty good minor league player. So we had a lot of success. Then it was like Billy Ripken and Casey Candell. Torey Labella was on that team. Oh, yeah. I will tell you that unequivocally that Billy Ripken and Casey Candell were two of the funniest dudes. I laughed every single day at stretch. It was just amazing. Funny as hell.
when I read that question, something that popped into my mind, and again, like so many guys that were just funny in general, but the first thing that popped in my head was Chooch in spring training and sometimes during the season. So every morning, Frank Kopenbarger, the former Phillies clubhouse guy, would kind of in his gravelly voice go, write your tickets down. Because eventually, you know, I guess ultimately some player would forget that his family was going to come to the game, and he'd grab Frank 20 minutes before first pitch, go, my wife and kids are coming. So he would come through multiple times during the day, go, write your tickets down. And so then Chooch every once in a while would just randomly come through in his Panamanian accent, and people always laughed. He'd go, write your tickets down. It was just a funny little thing that Chooch would do all the time. And he was I wrote a story about this years ago. Who's the most beloved player in that clubhouse? And this was during the 08-11 run, and Chooch won hands down. And it was because he was such a great person, but he was also sneakily very funny. And I say sneakily because, you know, he didn't rap too much with the media on camera, so a lot of fans at home didn't get to see it, but he was very, very funny behind the scenes. He would goof on Shane Victorino all the time.
That was great.
Yeah,
he would imitate Victorino.
He would, great. Yeah, like I said, because Shane would say like I said a lot, and so Chooch would say like I said. So Chooch to me popped in my head, but there's so many other guys. Ryan Howard's very funny. Jason Worth has a very dry sense of humor. Chase Utley, who we had on the other day, super dry sense of humor, and when he showed it, you're like, oh my gosh, Chase cracking a funny before
Jimmy was very funny.
J-Roll was funny. J-Roll was very funny as well.
Who you got, Jim?
Oh, too many to name. I mean, Rex Hudler was hilarious.
Oh, that's a good point.
When I covered the Yankees, I covered David Cohn. He was smart. He was insightful. He could be wickedly funny. You know, I don't know if I can tell all the stories, but a lot of too many to name. But Jimmy Rollins made me laugh often with some of the things he said. You know, just
I would make you laugh every once in a while, Jim.
Ruben,
Ruben's
antics would make you laugh.
Jimmy would always goof on me for questions I would ask. If he didn't like the question, he'd go, you can't look at me, give me a little side eye. There you go. Todd, come on with that question.
Brett Myers was funny. I'm trying to think of other guys. Just almost every day somebody would say something. I think it's important, you know, during a season to have those guys to kind of break the tension a little bit. And, you know, you'll hear them going back and forth with each other, and it'll make – Ryan Madsen had a killer sense of humor.
He did.
You know?
And on this team, you have, you know, Stubbs is very funny. Marsh is very. There's a lot of great personalities in this clubhouse as well. That's one of the reasons why they're so close and why they have so much fun is they are very, very loose and relaxed. I
did want to make one comment about you mentioned Chooch. The Phillies did a great thing. They in their Dominican Academy they named fields after Chooch, Carlos Ruiz, Bobby Abreu, and Juan Samuel. And they also named, I guess, their bullpens for Rolly DeArmas, long-time instructor, manager. I think that was a really, really cool thing for them to have done. Yeah, I'm not sure whose idea it was, but that was really awesome. I mean, three or four iconic Latin American players and people in this organization, and that was pretty classy.
And they hit all the baseball hotbeds. You know, Juan Samuel's from the Dominican, Chooch's from Panama, Bobby's from Venezuela, and I think Rolly's roots are
Cuban. He's Cuban. Yep.
So I agree with that because, you know, it's funny. You'll talk to a young player, and he'll not know who that player who was 30 years ago. You know, I remember talking to a player who didn't know who Willie Stargell was. And I had a hard time believing that. But it's just life. Life goes on. And, you know, young player in the Dominican Academy, one day will walk by Bobby Abreu Field and maybe take the time to learn about Bobby Abreu as a player Carlos Ruiz as a player and a man, Juan Samuel as a player and a man. And I think that's how you build legacy, and it's what the great franchises do. So, yes, tip of the hat.
Our buddy Sixto asked me a question. How many Ruben Amaro Jr. cards are there on my wall behind me? The answer is 0. I have 0 Ruben Amaro Jr. cards on the wall behind me.
It's very disappointing. They have me in the MLB Network, by the way.
They
a
do?
couple of different times.
They do?
They have a bunch of stuff.
But Ruben, this is not a slight against you. So these are all cards basically
right.
I collected when I was when I was a kid in the 80s.
Oh, okay.
And so have no Ruben. But this is true. I was just at Carl's Cards in Havertown a couple weeks ago. Took my kids there after they played in the rain in Little League, and I wanted to get out of the house. Went over there. Of course, they got Pokemon cards because that's what they do.
That's what they do.
But I did ask them if they had any Ruben Amaro Jr. cards because I was thinking of sneaking one on the wall behind me. They did not have any Ruben cards, but they are going to keep an eye out for some. So maybe maybe I'll get some on the wall eventually. We got another question.
They made like 8 or 10 of them, I think.
You must say, I've seen them on
12. Yeah,
I've seen them online for sure. They are out there. They are out there.
They're not very popular, but they're out there.
I got one, Ruben.
That's very nice, Jim. Thank you.
So Chris, his handle is Chris33. It's a bunch of numbers after it goes. What's your favorite Van Halen song?
Oh wow, are we talking? What era? The David Lee Roth era or the Sammy Hagar era?
Whatever era you like.
So the Hagar era, I like a lot. I like the Hagar era better. Probably Dreams, but in the David Lee Roth era, Hot for Teacher. I love Hot for Teacher. I like the video. I love the song. I love when I love that line. I don't feel tardy.
I'm going Jump only because that reminds me of being in the car with my parents driving to just that car that song when that came out. I remember just it being in the radio, so that just kind of takes me back to being a kid.
Whose warm-up song was that?
Jump? Is it a Phillies player?
Yes.
Maybe before my time. I don't remember. Was it before?
No, you covered him. You covered him. Ruben traded for him. He pitched a long time.
Really? Not Jamie Moyer.
Jamie Moyer.
It was Jamie Moyer? I do not remember that. How about that?
I'm a running with the devil guy.
Oh, that's a good one.
That's way back. That's way back, right? That's when I was growing up.
Oh, that's a classic. Come on.
Yeah.
Ruben, this is a question for you. How do you stay ready to hit when you're not playing every day? This is from Matt Wrigley.
Well, the beauty of it now, they have this, and I don't really know the name of the actual device, but one of the things that they have now, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do it. There's different drills, but one of the cool things is they have this pitch simulator that actually shows, and I was working with my brother on a different prototype of this with some other engineers that didn't get off the ground, but it now has been perfected where you can basically throw the pitches and you can simulate the actual pitch that the pitcher throws. And so you can actually put the screen up and do the video of the guy, and he ends up like going into his windup and throwing. And so the actual pitch, the rotation, the spin, you can duplicate it with these machines. It's pretty extraordinary. And I think pretty much, I don't know how many teams have these devices now. They're not inexpensive, but the Phillies have one in their cages here. I think that they have 1 or 2 in the David Montgomery complex at spring training. I have not. It's super secret, so I haven't been in there. But these devices and these pitch simulators are pretty amazing. I would love to have had those when I was in my pinch hit mode and pinch hit days, so that you can actually see the net. And they do high velocity stuff because everybody's throwing, in the bullpen especially. I think that's a good drill. One of those drills that can really help simulate. And there's a virtual reality stuff that some people use as well.
I've seen those.
The VR stuff. Those. And I think Dan O'Dowd is involved in one of those. I think he and his son are involved in that. And and that's another way to do it. But that's a good way to visualize and to actually see pitches and to react to them. Have your eyes and your brain, sort of react to things. So there's a lot of devices to do it with. Much better than when we used to just take my buddy. I used to take my boy Kevin Jordan to the back and they'd give me some soft toss, man. Throw me some BP or whatever and get me ready. Now they also have like the the assistant hitting coaches. There's 2 or 3 of them now, so those guys will go back there and throw some BP and try to keep them ready. And there's a lot of different things that they can do. But that was a long-winded way of saying there's a lot more opportunity and there's a lot better technology to be able to be prepared.
That's all these facilities now, and the technology. You can, like, if you're facing Aaron Nola, you can upload all his spin, all his pitches, all the data, the break, the vertical, this, that, and you can mimic that pitch so a guy can watch it. And you can do that in a state of the art batting cage right behind the dugout. It makes, if an infielder is going to go in to the game, he can go in the batting cage. It's long enough and get some throws in and take a few one-hoppers. It changes the dynamic for how a bench player can stay ready nowadays, the technology and the facilities. And it makes me appreciate the stories I would hear as a kid. Growing up in New England, I'd hear stories about, I'd hear stories about Yastrzemski on a night maybe he wasn't in the lineup. He would spend the game in the clubhouse with a bat boy who would flip him rolled up sanitary stockings and into the sanitary in a ball, and he'd smack him to get ready to pinch hit. Nowadays, the facilities, and it makes me marvel. The Red Sox have a batting cage now behind the dugout, right, Ruben? They dug into the earth and they built a batting cage. But
yes,
in 2004, they did not. They had nothing. They had a teeny dugout and a teeny clubhouse. And that stolen base by Dave Roberts, the history-making stolen base, he goes in there and he steals that base on Rivera and Posada by that much. And to be at top speed the way he was with essentially nowhere to warm up, maybe in that dank tunnel he was able to run a little bit underneath the stands there. But nowadays, if you think you're going to pinch run, you can go up in the batting cage and get a good stretch in. You can actually run, do some breaks and run. The old facilities in the old baseball, you had none of that. So staying ready as a bench guy was very difficult, and it makes me just marvel at what Dave Roberts did that night.
Yeah, and it was viewed as sort of bush league. I know this because that was my job. It was sort of bush league to be doing sprints like in between innings to do it out there on the field. People were looking at you like, dude, this is the major leagues. You don't do that stuff. So you had to get loose. And I remember being in Veterans Stadium doing breaks and leads in the clubhouse on the carpet. Or the tunnel running up, up the tunnel, and just to get my legs loose and to stretch out. So one quick thing about getting ready. I remember Albert Bell was super meticulous about everything he did. And Albert Bell basically had this guy who would flip him balls in between at bats. Every event, he had to flip them perfectly because Albert wanted because he knew that he'd be getting attacked on the low part of the zone. He'd have this guy throw like nothing but flips. Like he'd swing like 10 or 12 times just before he was going to hit every single day, every day, and every game and every at bat before he would have an at bat. I mean, it was, you talk about, the great ones do this stuff. The great ones have these routines. He in particular, man, you talk about being neurotic about it. And it paid off because he was real successful. Get hit.
Yeah. Oof.
What did you guys, when you listen back to the Chase Utley episode, what kind of sticks out to you guys? It was such a fun listen. I actually listened to it a couple times because I enjoyed listening to his answers so much.
It was a ton of fun. It was insightful. Obviously, it was great to have a few laughs, see him loosen up a little bit because he was such an intense player.
He was.
I kind of liked the stuff that he and Ruben went back and forth on the trade and how he said it was a sad night, but then, with the passage of time, and he even spent a little time in the front office with the Dodgers, he really grew to understand the Phillies' perspective on the trade and what they were trying to do. So I enjoyed hearing him come to that understanding of it all. But I enjoyed the whole thing. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, same here. I was fascinated. So a couple of things. We all know how thoughtful he is about things. And I just, when I listen to him talk, it's really interesting the level of, and I know he's a grown man now, but the way he thinks about things. I think it was a very, very cool thing for me. It's fascinating that they would take his kids and take them to Europe to give them that experience. I think that is fascinating, just as a decision to make with he and Jen. That's really cool stuff. Anytime you can give your kids the experiences that they were able to do, I think that's one, really unselfish, and two, I think it's really, really thoughtful on he and Jen's part. That was sort of fascinating as a father, and wanting to give your kids those experiences. That was kind of neat for me.
So for me, I thought the fact people always, I'm sure, I know you guys get this too. People go, "Oh, Ruben, who are the good guys in there? Who do you like? What's Chase like? What's Bryce like? What's Zach Wheeler like?" Right? You guys get that all the time. And to me, it's very telling. If you want to know the type of person that Chase Utley is, just know that when they were doing those playoff share meetings years ago, he was the guy in the clubhouse going, "We're taking care of the clubbies. The guys making 35 grand a year, picking up after you, the guys that run errands for you, the guys that do all this stuff, we're going to hook them up and give them some life-changing money." I think I look back in 2008, the World Series share was like, the full share was like $290,000. This past year, it was over 500 grand.
Wow.
And the fact that Chase in those meetings was making sure that those guys were taken care of, to me says everything, because 290 grand is a lot of money. And there are players out there that will say, we're earning that money. We should keep that money for ourselves.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Chase said, no. We're giving it to these guys that make garbage money and making sure that we can do something for them.
I will tell you that as a GM, when we went through that run, and when you start thinking about the playoff money that all these other people that were making, people who work in the clubhouse, people who travel, people who were, all types of people that that Chase was referring to. I get people like that come to me all the time, thanking me for sort of changing their lives. If you start thinking about the accumulation of money that they made over that 5-year period when we went to the playoffs every year, that's a lot of money. And it changes these people's lives and gives them an opportunity to do a lot of things. And I get people thanking me for that all the time. It wasn't me. It was a bunch of people, but they're really grateful. And I think if we look into this clubhouse right now, I think I understand that Kyle Schwarber was huge with that too.
Yeah.
He is that guy. He's the guy fighting. Now, there's others, obviously, but in particular, I know that Kyle Schwarber's got that same sort of mindset, which is why you love that guy and why he means so much to this ball club.
Phillies open a 3-game series this weekend against the Cardinals. Friday night tonight, Miles Michaelis versus Aaron Nola. Saturday, it's Sonny Gray versus Ranger Suarez. And Sunday night baseball, Lance Lynn versus Taiwan Walker. So, and then they have Rhys Hoskins possibly coming back early next week. We will be back on Monday. And I want to give a shout out to Shibe Vintage Sports, who sponsored the Chase Utley episode. Want to give them this opportunity to say that if you go into their store, they have 3 locations: Center City, Westchester, and Wayne. You go into their store, you mention the Phillies show, you get 15% off your purchase. If you can't make it into the store, you could go to shibesports.com and enter the promo code The Phillies Show. They sponsored the Utley episode, which is still up. So if you have not gone and listened to it, definitely check it out. It was great. Guys, so always a lot of fun to chat with you. We'll see you guys on Monday.
That's St. Louis, man. St. Louis, they're playing good.
Yeah,
they're better.
Great fun. Enjoyed it. And, of course, I'll smell you guys later.
Smell you, Jim.
This is The Phillies Show. If you haven't already, please subscribe to The Phillies Show wherever you get your podcasts. You can also watch us on our YouTube channel. If you like what we do, give us a review. Tell a friend. Catch Ruben, Jim, and me on Phillies Nation TV, presented by Valley Forge Tourism.
New episodes air an hour before every Saturday Phillies game on NBC Sports Philadelphia. Replays air throughout the week and on PhilliesNation.com. Get more of Ruben's analysis during, before, and after Phillies games on NBC Sports Philadelphia, on the Sports Radio 94 WIP Morning Show and MLB Network. Read Jim at the All City Network at allphly.com. Find more of me at MLB.com, the Phillies Beat newsletter, and occasionally on MLB Network.